this is a beginning demo of throwing from Mr. Olson. I'm just going to teach you mostly about centering and basically these first steps of making what would be a cylinder is what you're making. First of all, the wheel needs to be spinning in the correct direction. This is the wrong direction. It should be going counterclockwise. This particular wheel I'm on will go either direction. So it should be spinning counterclockwise. People will say, but I'm left-handed, I want to spin the other direction. If you're wanting to follow along with me and learn from me, you're going to be working in this direction, which is pretty much standard in America for the wheel to be spinning counterclockwise. Right? You're going to take a ball of clay, and you want to make sure this ball of clay is not wet. So you don't want it to be like this, where you have a wet ball of clay. Because what that's going to do is it's going to want to slide around on the wheel head. So you need your ball of clay to not be wet. You also don't want your wheel head to be wet, but damp is a good thing, because if it's too dry, that becomes a problem too. So you take a sponge, kind of dampen your wheel head, that's fine. So you have a ball of clay that's not particularly wet, you have a damp wheel head, and you stack it in the center. Okay, there's a place in Sausalito that's called, I'm going to blank, but it's going to pop up at me at some point. And they make ceramics using jigs. And the first thing they're going to do in this situation is they're going to spin the wheel and they're going to bring down a machine that's going to go like this, boom, and it's going to perfectly center the ball of clay. So I'm going to go from that perspective. I'm going to put my hand here and I'm going to lean into it and force the clay to center on my hand. Okay? So there's a very specific way I do this, which I'm going to talk to you about, but that's basically what we're looking for here. Step one is you need to center your ball of clay. That's off center and center. And that's the first thing you need to learn to do. When I was first learning to throw, this took me a long time to learn how to center. My students don't generally take that long to learn how to center because I give them very specific directions on doing that. What I want you to do is take your elbow, I want you to put it down into your hip so that if I'm pushing on my hand, it's into my hip. Okay, it's not sitting on top of my leg so that it's moving around. I want you to come around this direction and kind of film me from this side. Okay. It's not on the top. Here's what I see quite often when people are having trouble centering is their arm is moving around. I want it down into my hip and angled from here. There's a direct line between my hip bone, my elbow, the bone in my arm, and my pot. It's a straight line to the center of my pot. So that as I'm leaning forward, I'm able to push with my hip. See, I'm raising my back, and I can kind of push against this thing in a very straight line. People who are having difficulty with this are often up here, they're out here, they're all sorts of places, and I see their arm moving around. Put your elbow into your hip, and just kind of lean into it, and then come back slowly. That last part about coming back slowly is important. Watch, if I lean into this thing, and I come back, it's not centered. Lean into this thing, it looks like it's centered, it's not moving. Come around this side and take a look here. You'll see it looks like it's not moving. I come back, it's off center. So what you want to do is you always want to come back slowly. And you're going to find that it's centered. So step one is that you need to start by centering your ball of clay. I'm using a sponge here because the other thing that some people do that hurt themselves is they're trying to steady their hand by pushing down into the wheel head, as I'm doing this with my hand, which they don't usually do. But when they do that, they scratch up the bottom of their hand. So you need to steady yourself in your shoulders, in your leg. You need to find a way to get yourself steady without meaning pushing down into the wheel head. Okay, so step one is to center your clay like that. And if you're one of my students, this is the first thing I want you to show me, is I want you to show me that you can center your clay. I don't want you to get caught up in trying to do all 14 steps that I show you today. I just want you to focus on centering the clay. And if you can do this, I'm going to be really proud and happy for you, because it took me a very long time to do that. My instructor was in China at the time, and the student teacher was not really teaching. So step 1, you center your clay. Step 2, I'm going to turn this into kind of a hockey puck shape. So I'm going to take my other hand here, and there's a lot of ways that I do this. The way that I'm going to recommend you do for right now is to take your hand kind of like a fist, connect it to your outside hand here. The left hand is is holding it centered, while the right hand is coming down, kind of flattening out the top. Okay. That is your second goal. This hand is keeping it centered, and it's also kind of creating this kind of flat side here by rotating my hand slightly this direction, taking this hand on top. I'm also putting this elbow into my side. Remember that place in Sausalito, Heath's Ceramics, by the way, that's the name of that place in Sausalito. They have machines that just come down and create a bowl. If you think about the way that I'm holding myself right here, I'm trying to turn myself into one of those machines that comes down and creates that shape before coming away. Okay, so step 2, if you're one of my students, come and show me that you're able to create this shape here. It's flat on the top, straight on the sides, it's centered, okay? Step 2 is to create this kind of bundt cake or hockey puck shape. Step 3, you're going to put your 2 elbows on your side, on your legs. You're going to combine your hands, and you're going to, almost like a record player, which if you're younger than 40, you probably don't know what a record player is, and you're going to locate the middle by being nice and steady as you locate the middle. If your finger's not moving, it'll force kind of a centered spot right there. Then you're going to take your middle finger. Well, I use my middle finger. I imagine some people probably use other fingers, but I use my middle finger and wait until I'm very nicely centered right in the top. I wait. This needs to be centered, not moving. This needs to be not moving. And I assertively go straight down. It ended up slightly off center. A friend of mine named Joe Badiato, probably shouldn't be saying his name on YouTube. A friend of mine tells me he always starts slightly off center and works towards the center. But I always teach my students just find the middle and go straight down. I want the camera to come much more like straight down so you can kind of see down into the hole here. I'm going to curl my finger back like that, and then draw my finger back towards myself and intentionally, very specifically, try to create a flat bottom. I'm now going to go back over that bottom a couple times because my goal is to create a flat bottom. Quite often people end up rising as they're coming out, like slowly rising, creating a cup shape on the bottom, or they get nervous and they end up going down. Your goal is to create a flat bottom, and your goal is also to not make it like that. You don't want to widen it out more than you have to. That's why I was curling my finger, because I want to come out here further than the top. Okay? Okay, now, the next step is the hardest part. First, I'm going to kind of recenter it and make sure it's nice and centered. By doing that, I'm just kind of leaning in like one of those machines would do. And this is much more difficult to learn, and it takes just a lot of practice. I'm going to put my left finger here, my right middle finger here. My right middle finger is slightly lower than my left finger. Okay? I'm going to connect my hands. I'm going to connect them as best I can to try to make it strong. Once again, it's kind of like the ceramic place in the sense that I'm trying to create a tool here that's going to go down, it's going to squeeze, it's going to rise. The outside is going to be slightly out underneath the in one. So the inside finger is pushing out on the clay. The outside finger is slightly underneath it, so it's kind of getting underneath. I'll exaggerate that for a moment. Let me push this thing out. See if you can come from this perspective, kind of right here. You'll see that my inside finger has pressed out on that, and my inside finger is underneath that. So that as this one pushes out, this one's underneath, kind of getting under it, and is able to get a hold of it and pull it up. That's the kind of concept there. In practice, it's going to look like this. You're going to push out on the inside and in on the outside, and you're going to ride. And hopefully in the video you can kind of see that thing that I was talking about. Now obviously this is not easy. It takes practice. That last part is where you're most likely going to have difficulty. I'll give you one last piece of advice before I end this video, and that is that You should be spending your time, go ahead and come up here on me. You should be spending your time trying to get better at throwing, not trying to create things at this point in this process. If you find yourself and it's off, if you've opened it and done any pulling or anything like that, and it's wrong, it's off center, it's wonky, it's, you know, whatever, there's some sort of issue with it, just cut it off and start over again. Okay, because your goal, step one goal, is to get to know how to center your clay. Step 2 is to get it into that hockey puck shape. Step 3 is to be able to go down in the center while it's still centered on the outside, and you have a hole right down the middle. These are all worthwhile steps for you to focus on. Don't focus on, but I really just want to take something home. Okay? You really shouldn't be thinking about that for a long time. Right now, you should be focusing on those first few steps and getting good at those few steps. You shouldn't be trying to get step Z when you're really not very solid on step O. You should be focusing on the steps, not focusing on creating things at this step. All right, so that's the end of my video. Thank you very much.